on Moco Road. See you there.
Hi, I am Emiliana Beechan and I am a mental health and conflict resolution consultant. Welcome to Mind Matters, the show where we explore the intricate world of mental health and the art of conflict resolution. Join us as we hear from mental health professionals, conflict resolution experts, and everyday people who have transformed their lives through understanding and communication. Mind Matters, coming soon to WESN Content Capital.
Don't stop.
Previously on Cover Star.
Just keeping on with my flow.
We met the voices and we met our first two panels of judges. Episode 1, Vonette Bickford and myself, Hannah Abdul. Episode 2, Candice Alcantara and the piano girl Johanna. And shout out to our judges for tonight's episode, Jarrell Forbes, Luke Samerson, and Vonette is back. Over the last two episodes, we got into the covers and the judges looked, listened, and scored. Two contestants were unable to perform due to illness. They did not score and they were out of the running. This is Cover Star, where music history meets its next voice.
On WESN, the content capital.
WESN.
Creative problem solving or a lack of proficiency. That, I guess, at times is one of the questions we could ask, because more often than not, human beings are resistant to change. So when someone attempts to do something new, assuming that's what they're doing, that's what the motivation is, you're attempting to find a different solution to a problem, it doesn't necessarily always come across very well, very positive. You know, sometimes it comes across as being a really bad idea. And that could be because it is a bad idea. It could be because not everybody understands what it is you're trying to accomplish. Or while they may understand what you're trying to accomplish, they don't necessarily agree with the means and the methods and the ability for such methods to accomplish what the goal is. So at times, you don't necessarily want to be too harsh when you judge people for potentially thinking outside the box. The question, of course, is every time someone does something that breaks the mold, is it thinking outside the box, or is it a lack of understanding of what the mold is in the first place and why certain molds or rules or procedures or standard operating procedures exist? It was something I was asking myself because, of course, it's very easy to just criticize someone that has a certain amount of baggage that has harmed how they are perceived. You could say the same thing for an institution like the TTPS, the service. Apparently, the police service made a request of a businesswoman because her vehicle was allegedly used in a shooting. So, apparently, they utilized She was given a notice when she was told that she could collect a vehicle because I believe in the investigation of the shooting, they seized her Toyota Hilux. When told that she could come and collect it from the station, she was served with a notice under the road traffic ordinance. And that led to the owner of the vehicle suing the TTPS, contending that the service improperly used the road traffic ordinance to obtain information unrelated to a traffic offense. Because the notice was to say who was driving the vehicle. And they used the road traffic ordinance. And the lawyers are basically saying, well, this is a road traffic offense. You need to actually utilize the proper mechanisms to investigate your shooting. Now, one could say it's a technicality, but at the end of the day, the law is the law, whether we like it or not. It's an inconvenient truth. So the attorney is quoted as saying, the notice and no decision is therefore unauthorized or contrary to law and therefore unlawful. And that's the thing. At the end of the day, as much as you might think it might be a technicality, there's no foundation in law to enforce it, and thus any attempt to do so might be illegal. And therefore, why this matters to the rest of us is, you open doors to these things, you notch it a crack, and then someone's going to open it a little bit further until eventually, whether by increments or by one unfortunate incident, it's blown wide open and it becomes a free-for-all. So, apparently the TTPS agreed to rescind the notice and the lawsuit was withdrawn. The question is, was it creative problem solving? Maybe there is a deficiency in the law to try to compel information, because assuming they have enough evidence to say there's reasonable evidence to say that this vehicle was used in a drive-by shooting, and they want to get certain information of who was using it at the times where the incident occurred, where they suspect this vehicle was in use, is it that they had no better mechanisms in order to try to get that information from the owner? Which, if that is true, then might be an example of what I'm talking about when I say the criminal justice system laws have deficiencies. The flip side is, it could be someone that tried a thing, not necessarily with a good reason. They just decided to do a certain thing a certain way, and it didn't necessarily conform with what the law says it should be done. Meanwhile, there was another situation in a lawsuit against the police and Crime Watch host Ian Allen, where an individual apparently was brought to the station in order to appear on the program, but the plaintiff alleges that he was held in an office against his will and for 75 minutes until the police came to arrest him. Now, the judge in the case basically said, because the plaintiff alleges he was confined to an office of Ian Allen's, but the judge said there's not enough evidence to prove that you were actually held against your will until the police arrived. And then it seems as though the initial confinement or arrest was correct. The problem is, while the initial arrest was lawful, the prolonged detention was unjustified. And he should not have been held for more than 24 hours based on the information available. So the plaintiff was subsequently still awarded damages to the tune of $250,000, plus the state has to pay, or was ordered to pay, $40,000 in legal costs. I mean, he did have to pay Mr. Allen for his legal costs, I believe. But the point is, the state, that's another $290,000 going out the window. because I don't know if they were trying a thing. How many investigations are police officers trying to circumvent bad law, and how many police investigations are police officers trying to circumvent the law? Those are not necessarily the same thing. Legally, they'll appear the same. The motivation behind those two scenarios could be very different. And the reason why I bring all of that up now is, now I did say, as far as I'm aware, Kaya Seeley was not arrested, but it seemed as though she was under police guard, at least initially when she was in the hospital. I'm not entirely sure what her status is now. I believe her mother, or at least a female relative, I believe it's her mother, has complained that she was not arrested nor charged, and yet the police were restricting access to her. One of the things is, she was told, this is the mother, that one of the potential reasons why access was being restricted was because Miss Seeley was insistent from the get-go, screaming that they're lying, there was no gun. Now the question is, was that shooting the unfortunate consequence of trying to circumvent procedure? And again, are you circumventing procedure with the motivation that, well, the system isn't working, so we have to operate in gray areas? Or are you just wanting to circumvent procedure? Regardless, however, I would argue this is an example of things not working out very well. Probably go more into this tomorrow, but the police did say that they told Miss Seeley herself, which her mother wasn't necessarily certain that she agreed with them doing this. When they went to see her, the police executive said that they are investigating the matter and they'll make it public. I'm not entirely sure if that was something that was supposed to be known to the public, because I have my doubts that any police investigation in this matter will be made public, unless we get very limited explanations that still leaves us with questions. But until the police could actually show us this is the gun, and to some extent at this point, even if they do so now at the 11th hour, I'm sure a lot of people will be like, yeah, sure, that's the gun. Where do you find that from? In some shelf in the back of a station? Some random station just had a gun lying around? Granted, there might be proper procedures to prove chain of custody of evidence from the crash. I just don't know if the public will be willing to believe it because of the fumbling, bumbling, stumbling with regards to the handling of this matter and the public communications and managing the expectations of the public. This is not about spin and lying. This is about not saying things in a foolish manner to hurt yourself unnecessarily, because I would argue the Commissioner of Police, he has come out to say that the situations with body cameras were flawed with regards to who controlled the footage and who controlled the systems and the contracts and who signed for the contracts and blah, 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 blah. And he's come out to speak about multiple different situations. And that's cool with regards to different efforts to procure body cameras, and then come out to say, well, procurement is a long process and you can't rush it and blah, 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 blah. Except there's two issues with that. One, we didn't hear when the contract was canceled. We didn't hear anything about any follow-up at any point in time, as far as I'm aware, between then and now. Any attempt to restart the process, any attempt to find a different avenue, only that it was in your infinite wisdom, your belief that you could get cheaper cameras. And then, while trying to explain throughout I don't know how many days, weeks, months, about why the body cameras that the police had were not sufficient in the past, I don't think I saw this level of explanation with the contracts and who was not authorized to sign and blah, 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 blah. We only get it now that you're under fire, now that you have people calling for your head, because you took a situation that already people would have questioned once they heard the news. Police shooting. Oh, he was running from the police. Oh, well, you know. I mean, some people are like, well, he was running from police. He must be guilty of genocide. He was running from police. You know, no one runs from the police for mundane reasons. I just saw a video last night. A college student was running from the police because he had a bong. This was in America. The cops basically said it was ridiculous. It wasn't even an arrestable offense for them. That is to say, he might have gotten a ticket for the bong, having it in his car, and whatever he was smoking. I assume it was weed. But he wasn't going to be arrested for it. But because he ran, it triggered a set of protocols that said now that they had to arrest him. And they themselves reached the point where they didn't want to arrest him. They couldn't believe that's what he was running for. So let's chill with the whole, oh, why was he running? Well, we don't know why he was running. Let's not forget, Minister Sage said, if you suspect the police are not legit, better to be tried by 12 than to be carried by 6. So at the end of the day, I say all that to say everything that the commissioner said from the moment the shooting occurred has been wrong. He claimed a certain version of events. Then video footage came out basically to disprove his words. Whether he knowingly lied or he himself was misled, we don't know. But given his continued defense of the situation, I would imagine that he knowingly said what he said on the Tuesday of the shooting. If you want to perceive that as a lie, I leave that to you. Then he doubles down. He doubles down with what to me is very, very lame, blatantly obvious excuses. Oh, well, you don't know what happened before. What does that mean? You're not even trying to give us a version of events, much less show us the evidence that we're supposed to believe in. We're supposed to believe in evidence that you have that we can't see. That's not how this works. I mean, think about it. Do you tell a judge, well, Judge, Your Honor, we have evidence. Please believe us that we have evidence. No. I get it. This is the court of public opinion. But unfortunately, you are putting yourself in a hole. Don't expect people to just assume that everything is fine, and when you are trying to dig yourself out of it with some of the lamest excuses that I have seen, to be honest. And of course, the minister backing up that nonsense doesn't help. This is one case where his background as a police officer goes against him. And now that the body camera conversation is coming to the forefront, because others have come out in support of Justice C. Prasad's words, at the end of the day, trying to say these things now about how bad the situation is now, trying to give us more of an explanation now, it rings like an excuse. It seems like an excuse. It's very convenient you have all of this explanation now. Leadership is to provide sufficient explanation in order to manage our expectations from the beginning. Help us understand where you're coming from the beginning. Don't try to keep things secret, especially this. Because it's not as though the public doesn't perceive that the body cameras aren't on the streets. As far as the public is aware, there are no body cameras out there. So if you're trying to hide the fact that there are no body cameras out there, I'm fairly certain the criminals, whether rightfully or wrongfully, will make a certain level of assumption that the body cameras aren't working either. So I don't know exactly what was the reason for holding this information close to your chest, because this body camera conversation, it didn't start with Mr. Samaru's murder. Yeah, I'm going to say it that way from now on. Prove me otherwise. You have the evidence? Let's go. It didn't start there. But you had nothing to say before. You had nothing to say before. So now you have a lot of things to say when your hands get caught in the cookie jar. Because at the end of the day, again, I'll end with this. Mr. Minister, you know who the body cameras were meant to protect in this situation? Not just Mr. Samaru, but the 3 officers involved. And the rest of the police service. But apparently, the Minister of Homeland Security lacks the strategic insight to understand how to defend the service and the officers. I'm saying do it with a tool that promotes transparency so that there can be no doubt or lack of trust in the explanations provided when defending police action. The Minister and the Commissioner seem a lot more comfortable with basically telling us things that they cannot back up with any facts, and then are confused as to why we don't believe them after the situation started off wrong with an untrue statement of fact. Again, I'll leave it up to you if you perceive it to be a lie or not. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll switch gears. There is more and more indicators that things in the economy might not be so hot. Stay tuned. We'll be right back up.
Join the Face of Sports host, Andre Batiste, alongside his NFL co-host, Sean Michael Small, at the WESN Super Bowl watch party. The location, Murray's on Moco Rapa Road, Super Bowl 60, Patriots versus Seahawks. Join us to watch the conclusion of a great season of American football, the spectacle of the halftime show, and the phenomenon of Super Bowl ads. 6 p.m. February 8th, Murray's on Moco Rapa Road. See you there.
Hi, I am Emiliana Beechan, and I am a mental health and conflict resolution consultant. Welcome to Mind Matters, the show where we explore the intricate world of mental health and the art of conflict resolution. Join us as we hear from mental health professionals, conflict resolution experts, and everyday people who have transformed their lives through understanding and communication. Mind Matters, coming soon to WESN Content Capital.
Last year, you had the time of your life.
Amplia!
This year will be even more fantastic. Get your tickets now for Gone But Not Forgotten 2.
I feel like home.
They gave us the memory.
Woman, you could run away too.
They gave us the rhythms of life. Now let's give them their flowers.
Trinidad and Tobago, join us for a special tribute to our legendary musical icons who have passed on in Gone But Not Forgotten.
Including Bunny, Swallow, Singing Francine, Shadow, Arrow, Maestro, Rootsman, Blacks, Sandoli, Ras Shorty Eye, plus lots more. Their music still lives on in our heart. An unforgettable night as we celebrate their legacy in Gone But Not Forgotten. Wednesday, February 4th at Napa and Thursday, February 5th at Sapa. Showtime both nights, 6:30 p.m. Your master of ceremonies, Sonny Bling.
Tickets $300 and $250.
Early bird tickets bought by Monday, January 26th. Cost $50 less.
Available at Crosby's, Jumbo Foods Barataria, Mart's Liquor Palace, Diego Martin Main Road, all Kenny Sports, Western Union, Tuna Buna, all Extra Foods, Athletes by the Park, and IslandEtickets.com. An extra $10 off for online purchases. For more info, call 732-3402. Gone, but not forgotten.
Don't stop,
Previously on Cover Star,
just keeping on with my flow.
we met the voices and we met our first two panels of judges. Episode 1, Vonette Bigford and myself, Hannah Abdul. Episode 2, Candice Alcantara and the piano girl Johanna. And shout out to our judges for tonight's episode, Jarrell Forbes, Luke Samerson, and Vonette is back. Over the last 2 episodes, we got into the covers and the judges looked, listened, and scored. 2 contestants were unable to perform due to illness. They did not score and they were out of the running. This is Cover Star, where music history meets its next voice.
On WESN, the content capital.
Hey, it's you come in. Long time I see you. This station complete. Ready for children party. Mommy! Jay, you can't go nowhere with these children. And you know you can't depend on Kevin neither Steven to see about them. Yeah. Total waste. So I supposed to stay home the whole time? Jada is 12. She could see about them. You just leave Jada to see about Kia and Kayla. I thought it was your mother or your sister. Who? Them always busy. Jada could handle that. She cooking and cleaning a long time. And the next 2, better know what time it is. It's only me, you know. I will talk to my mother. She just home these days. She will make sure the children okay. Alright. Let me see the moves for later.
Before you ramage, make sure the children okay. Call 996 to report all child abuse now. A message from the Children's Authority of Trinidad and Tobago.
Maybe he landed here totally by coincidence. But if by chance he's admiring your fresh coat of Benjamin Moore soft sky blue, well, that's a pretty high compliment. Coming from an expert.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com. I'm back here on talk about the WSND Content Capital Show. Michael Small, joined by former Minister of Finance and attorney at law, which is actually quite interesting because for someone who technically doesn't have an academic background in economics, she seems to be far more knowledgeable than some people who allegedly has some academic background in economics who also hold the portfolio that Karen Nessishera formerly held. Karen Nessishera, good morning.
Morning to you, Sean. And yes, today a lot of discussion has been held over the last week or two, and unreasonably so, understandably so, on the zone of special operations and the impact it has had as a crime-fighting tool. I don't intend to go down that road, mainly because there has been a major discussion both in the media, print and electronic media, and certainly Sean has been a very good guide in terms of what that means. Certainly, if anyone thinks that what is going on in the criminal crime fighting initiative does not affect the economy, they are very wrong. And why I say that, which I will speak to later on, but certainly when you look at Standard & Poor's, you know there are two major, there are other, yes, but international sovereign rating agencies that tell the foreign direct investor, is Trinidad and Tobago a good investment deal? Are you going to, at the end of the day, when you lend money to Trinidad and Tobago, are you going to see, at the end of the day, are you going to be able to see that you will get back what you have lent them at the end of the period of borrowing, but also the coupon rate, the interest rate, are they going to be able to maintain the interest rate, which is usually twice a year? So yes, that is true, but when you look at Standard & Poor's, for example, and that's why I'm going to be focusing on the economy, is because when you look at it, and they had to do the assessment together with Moody's, as the Trinidad and Tobago's sovereign rating, which would look at all aspects of the economy of Trinidad and Tobago to determine whether the bondholders would be prepared to lend money to Trinidad and Tobago and what would be the interest rates at which they would lend it. When you look at it, one of the things you learn from Standard & Poor's is that they look at the positive, the political stability, the constitution and democratic rights that have been upheld in Trinidad and Tobago. So if that is a positive for Trinidad and Tobago, certainly what we are seeing in the crime fighting initiatives, and I mean I could go on and on, I'm so sure it has done that. I mean you can't get around it. From the Prime Minister attacking independent senators, attacking the President, my God. The Commissioner of Police talking about sending his men for counseling. The Minister of National Security talking about we need to have more, not so much body cameras, but we need to have protection for the police officers. What message are you sending to the people? You know that this is not going to end up right, you know. This is not going to end up right. So yes, you're going to see a reduction in the number of crimes. Yes, you'll be able to boast about that, but at what cost? At what cost? And that does filter into the economy. Because as I said to you, when Standard & Poor's had to do their assessment of Trinidad and Tobago, one of the positives, two positives. One, they looked at the external position in Trinidad in terms of ability to pay back loans, and they really were talking about the Heritage and Stabilization Fund. That's what they were talking about, because the Heritage and Stabilization Fund has about US $3.5 billion, and the last borrowing that this government undertook, and which they boasted about, say there were 2.5 times the number of subscriptions for that bond. It has a lot to do with the HSF, but the HSF has a lot to do with our revenue position, which has a lot to do with our energy position, which currently, if you look at the Heritage and Stabilization Fund assessment and Moody's assessment, both of them said the outlook for Trinidad and Tobago was negative, from stable to negative. And so why am I bringing it up again? Because very recently, the Standard & Poor's looked at the question of our liquidity position. And liquidity position is the excess cash that is at hand in order to lend for purposes of investment, for purposes of stimulating the economy. So if your liquidity position in your country is not where it should be, then what it's saying is that the economy is not where it should be. And it's very noteworthy that when you look at the reasons, it actually was, I think they did a rating of Trinidad and Tobago, that is Standard & Poor's, let me get the article, where they said that the liquidity position is on the decline in Trinidad and Tobago. And the very same reasons they identified years ago, declining liquidity prompts Standard & Poor's warning on Trinidad and Tobago banks. So the very same reasons that I identified for the decline of liquidity position, that is the ability of banks to lend money to institutional investors and private investors, remain to be the same problem that Moody's and Standard & Poor's identified for the outlook for Trinidad and Tobago for being negative. And what were those reasons? Let me just quickly look at that. When they looked at the key drivers for liquidity in Trinidad and Tobago, they did say that there was a downturn in the loans to deposit ratio, which means that less people are borrowing based on what your deposits are. And mainly your deposits are from checking and savings accounts. And who are those depositors? Who are those persons who hold the savings account? The government of Trinidad and Tobago. Where do they get the deposits from? The Revenue Department, the Revenue Division. And what they say is the decline in government savings, persistent fiscal deficit, inefficient public sector management, unstable government savings are causing increased volatility in domestic banks, meaning that because the government is unable to ensure that the pricing for the energy, natural gas, which has gone up by the way, natural gas and from oil, that they're not sustaining the level of revenue so they can deposit that money into certain banks. The banks are lacking in liquidity necessary to lend to the institutional and the private investor. And so why is liquidity important to Trinidad and Tobago? I have something very briefly, but I think it's important. Is that facilitating credit and economic growth, public confidence and stability. You also want absorbing economic shocks, because if your country is going through a period of hardship and there's not enough cash available, and they need that cash to be made available and it's not available, it is not going to be able to absorb the economic shocks over which we have no control. We know about the geopolitical issues that are ongoing. We know about the tariffs that are ongoing with the United States, and therefore that does not translate into investor confidence. And this is continuing. So it makes you wonder, honestly, why is the government putting so much of its eggs in the basket of crime and being so aggressive about it? They're not backing down. The Prime Minister attacking the senators, attacking the president, the commissioner of police. I mean, how could he talk about sending his members for counseling? And he talk about the people who have lost their lives, going into neighborhoods where you have people saying those are the areas where they have a high young African population. What are you doing? You are causing greater divisiveness in this country, which translates into the economy. I don't know if that is the government recognizes that, if that is a distraction. And then the taxes, everything they're taxing you, that is their short-term prescription for economic diversification, revenue generation, and then telling you that all those taxes that we are making you pay is all for your good.
Is it really diversification, though?
But that is
because I would argue you're not diversifying your economy, you're just withdrawing money out of it at a time when I would have thought it may have been more prudent. Yes, you're going to potentially have to get loans, but when you look at the New Deal and how that got America out of the Great Depression, they basically had infrastructure projects in part to inject money into the economy, not take it out.
I think when I say that, I'm probably saying it a bit of tongue-in-cheek.
Oh, okay, right.
I'm saying it in tongue-in-cheek because if I recall, I think either Moody's or Standard & Poor's, when they're looking at responses or prescriptions, one of the things that they had considered was looking for revenue, fiscal diversification. That's a nice way of saying find the money. Find the money and find it fast. You could have a diversification project. It's going to take 2 or 3 years before it ever see the light of day. In the meanwhile, your government has no money. Your government has no money. It has no money, and you understand what liquidity means. You already got a poor rating, both from Moody's, both from Standard & Poor's, which have said that the outlook will not change unless within the 6 to 24 months there's structural adjustment, there's an increase in the fiscal, in the tax generation of the country. Where's the government going to get the taxes from? And it seems to me, I may be wrong, it seems to me that 2 things are happening at the same time. They are distracting you with the crime so that you have a big problem, but you have a bigger problem. The bigger problem is the economy.
I just want to point out, I complained about this with Karen about the previous administration. How, oh my gosh, some catastrophe happened. We need to distract the public. Let's distract them with a bigger catastrophe.
Absolutely.
Like, that's what it seemed like in the last 2 to 3 years. It was just negative news after negative news after negative news. So the fact that we're back here again.
I do think so. I do think that 2 things are happening at the same time. I do think the whole thing with the zone of special operations, the legislation, has been a distraction for the country. It has caused so much socio-economic upheaval, so much anger, so much resentment, and they have not tried to tame it down. They have not tried to pull it back. In fact, what you're seeing, whether the commissioner of police saying, I'm not going to resign, I'm going to get them for counseling. What are you talking about? You need body cameras. We don't talk about body cameras. What about the vest protector officers? What is the message you're sending? So, you have to look, which I have said before, that you have to look at the fact that, yes, there has been a significant decrease in crime, but at what price?
Well, murders. We
right.
can't say about other crimes.
Okay, but murders is what usually people talk about, the murders, right? So using that as the barometer, using that as the yardstick, but at what price? At what price? One thing that Trinidad and Tobago has always been attractive for when we had the International Financial Center and trying to show, well, why was Trinidad and Tobago a good investment? We had political stability. We did not have the respect for the democratic principles. When you had elections, all those things were positives for Trinidad and Tobago. But I think it's being eroded. And I believe that it's being eroded because the government simply is under tremendous pressure. And the latest from the Standard & Poor's, which is what I came to speak about really, is that you already have Standard & Poor's and Moody's saying to Trinidad and Tobago that the outlook for your economy is negative. Both of them. Prior to that, I think it was only Moody's that said it was negative, and one of them said it was stable, and the other one said it was negative.
Yeah, it might have been, yes, for 1 year.
Yes, but then now they both came out, and the reasons they have given, this is what they gave, and this is the same reasons that you're seeing for liquidity decline. They have given as the main reasons for the decline in government savings, volatile energy revenue, because they've already said, when you look at the report, that the pricing of oil and gas is not inconsistent with what the budgetary expectation was. Persistent fiscal deficits, meaning your income or what you expect to take, your expenditure is more than your revenue, and it has persistently so. Inefficient public sector management, unstable government savings. And where's that government savings, which is feeding liquidity? If your energy prices are less than you anticipated, then what you would have deposited into the banks, the First Citizens, which they have identified, Republic Bank, which they have identified, into the checking and savings account. If they are unable to deposit the same amount, it means that the loans, the increase in loans, if you have to pay back those loans to the investors, is equivalent almost to the amount that you have deposited in these accounts. And that is not a good thing for Trinidad and Tobago. So these persistent fiscal deficits, high recurrent expenditure, weak growth in the non-energy sector, government savings unstable, which is why I believe that they're going after you with taxes and then telling you do it for your good. And you know what makes it more difficult? Is that when this government came into office and before, there was so much, and that is the key, trust and confidence. There was so much trust and confidence. We will fix it. We will, don't you worry, we will fix it. You haven't fixed it. You haven't fixed it.
Or the real one is, well, where are you going to get the money to do all of this? And the answer to that was, we'll find the money.
We'll find the money. You know where they find the money? They find the money, you're paying the tickets. You see your tire needs to change it, they find the money.
Oh, just by the way, so just a small anecdote. When, of course, now wrecking started more in earnest with the whole road traffic violations being now increasingly enforced, let's put it that way. What did the police say? Oh, well, wrecking is not revenue generation, it's for safety. It's for safety because, if you park on a corner and then the ambulance gets stuck and the bus and the this and the that. And what did we see yesterday in one of the media houses, social media? Because a police car was parked on the corner, it caused traffic disruption. A bus couldn't make the corner. I assume it would have been painted yellow. I don't know if it actually is, if it's yellow on the corner there. But hey, you know what? Rules for thee, not for me. Also, there was an incident where, from what I understand, in parts of Tradley Road, you're supposed to park on the same side that you're driving on. You're not supposed to cross the lanes to park. And somebody pointed that out to me because we witnessed a police car do just that, something that apparently they have told the public they're not supposed to do.
And that has a lot to do with it, You see, that is where it's falling short. People have gotten to the point that you're saying these things, but do you really mean it? Because to me, what is at risk, and what the government is focusing on based on what Standard & Poor's, what Moody's, what they already know, they're not generating enough fiscal revenue. And in the short to medium term, they're looking towards you, the people of Trinidad and Tobago, to do that. And they are taxing you every single way they can. They're taxing the government, they're taxing the bank with the asset levy, they're taxing you in the bank, speeding, exactly.
Yeah.
They're taxing you left, right, and center. And it is not working. It is not working because this is what I was speaking to. Standard & Poor's now are looking not just at the sovereign rating, which is not good, They very recently, I think on February 1st or thereabouts, in an event, they reported on the declining liquidity prompts Standard & Poor's warning on Trinidad and Tobago. They are looking at Trinidad and Tobago and they are saying that declining liquidity buffers. Do you know what that means? They don't have enough cash. And they say where the cash is not coming from, the domestic banks, First Citizen, and they did identify why First Citizen and Republic Bank have been the target of the decline in negative outlook because they're majority state-owned banks. And as far as I can recall, the Prime Minister was speaking of increasing the number of directors on the banks, on these banks, by members of her government, certainly not independent or independent persons. And what they have said to you is that since earlier, I think in October, both First Citizen and Republic Bank outlook was put to negative in October 2025. And the reason that was given was they were majority state-owned banks. They said both banks have large exposure in terms of loans and investment. In other words, if the bank's directors are mainly of government members, then the decision making will not be so much in commercial, what is profitable commercially, but what is politically sustainable. And they have said that this affects the bank's business operations and creditworthiness and the erosion of fiscal and external buffers. So Trinidad and Tobago, from what I can see, is that while we're talking all this thing about the zones of special operations, it's just one aspect of a situation in this country where our economy is not where it should be. The government has not been able to do what it said it was going to do, and that the government has turned towards taxing you left, right, and center, every which way. People who cannot afford it. You close down CPEP. You close down URP. You close down the forestry division. You close all of that, and yet you expect those very same people to be able to pay the taxes.
I think someone was talking about it again with regards to on some broadcast, I believe last night, about how bad things were in URP and CPEP. We're not saying that things were bad.
Yeah.
Where's the evidence? To borrow a phrase from your colleague, Minister of Homeland Security, Roger Alexander, show us the evidence, right? Why can't you? Why can't the Prime Minister back up her claims that two independent senators apparently were attempting to curry favors? Because when the independent senators and the opposition tried to force the issue in the Senate, the President of the Senate said, there's not enough here, nothing to see here, move along, move along. I mean, you can't make aspersions of criminal activity and then do nothing about it.
Well, yes, you can. You know why? Because it's called distraction and deflection. That's what it's called. So, yes, that's what it's called. From a political point of view,
yes.
If you are in difficulty economically and you're not able to deliver what you said to the people, we will fix it, we'll find the money and all that good stuff. When you see that Standard & Poor's, who you have no control over, Moody's, over which you have no control over, and now you have Standard & Poor's now adding to it by saying your liquidity position is declining because your loan to deposit ratio, deposits are deposits from the government, deposits are deposits from the government from the revenue that it gets mainly from the energy sector. When you see that is declining, when you see that the efforts to diversify are really efforts of diversification in taxing you over and over again, when you see that areas where the government should give that support to, because the marginal propensity to consume, which I've spoken about already, that adds to the economy, that adds to the employment position in Trinidad, when you do all of those things, and then on top of which, when you're fighting crime, and you're getting the response from the public regarding that, I just do not know, to be very frank with you, I don't know how much more. I'm going to say that. I don't know how much more that this country can take.
The thing is, politically, there are a lot of similarities with regards to what we're seeing now and some of the complaints that were being made from the former administration in the sense of, certain issues with regards to budget allocations, certain things not being done, not seeing how these management in order to try to find new... Now, from what I understand, it seems as though the PNM, they weren't necessarily so confident to go as far as the current administration is going. But the circumstances more or less existed. Now, one could say that maybe it got worse over time. The situation with the Ministry of Education in particular and the budgetary shortfalls to that ministry, that has been existing for years on top of years on top of years. And I fear that it's literally a hole that's only going to get worse, right? But like I said with regards to the former administration's budgets, we don't get the full picture about yes, we got a deficit, but there's a lot of expenditure that the government just doesn't do and doesn't tell us that they're not spending money on, and some of that can be education.
Yeah, but to be fair, number one, just answer that very broadly, I think the difference between this government, what you said is true. I think the difference between this government and the previous administration, they came on a rescue mission. They said we're going to fix it, we're going to find the money. And people believe that because the key to any economy is trust and confidence. And people did believe that, and that's simply not so. And in response to what you have said, there has been a deterioration since this government has come into force. It has been a deterioration. I'll give you an example, and it's in the central bank report too. They have said that both in, let me get the exact wording, liquidity, the excess liquidity, money that's available for investment and for loans, it fell. This is a fact. It fell from 6.6 billion available access cash in May last year, 2025, to by October, 3.5 billion. That's over 3 billion of excess liquidity that has been taken out of the system since there has been a change of government. You cannot argue with those facts. You also cannot argue with the fact that what has also contributed to the tightening of liquidity, the inability for persons to access cash, is because the central bank has taken much of what would have been available to assist the foreign exchange reserve position and has taken that money and put it in the foreign exchange reserves, as a result of which there's less money available to the banks to lend money. That is a fact. It says so. Foreign exchange borrowings, the fact is the foreign exchange reserve position has fallen even more dramatically since this government has been in office. They now have, according to the data, they now have about 5 months of import cover, which is what you need to import, whether it is retail or whether it is factors that you use in the commercial or commercial area of operation. The fact is that has reduced significantly. Those are facts. Interbank borrowings, when banks borrow from each other, they said it has doubled. Those are facts. They said it's doubled in 2024 because of the tightening, lack of cash available. So banks are borrowing from each other more and more. Those are facts. So you can't say that. I agree that the former government definitely was wanting, but the reality is you came on a rescue mission, and that rescue mission, the reality is that you have not been able. And by the way, when the Standard & Poor's and Moody's critique you, this is what they say: the decline in excess liquidity from, as I said, 6.6 billion in May 2025 to 3.8 billion. And by the way, that means cash available to lend. And the government prior to that had reduced what they call reserve requirement, which used to be 14%. In other words, banks were required to keep in reserve at least 14% of their cash. They reduced it from 14 to 10%. So there was more cash available, more cash to lend. And even though you had more cash to lend, we find ourselves in a position that we are in today, that according to the report from the Standard & Poor's, ongoing fiscal challenges, volatile energy revenues have led to unstable government borrowings, causing volatility in bank deposits. Liquidity in the foreign exchange sales, it has been removed because 4.5 billion has been used by the central bank to prop up our foreign exchange reserves. They also said that the asset levy, which is a tax that they impose on commercial banks, has also contributed to a reduction. So what I'm saying to you, Sean, is that yes, the former government was wanting, and I criticized them openly.
Yep, so did I.
Exactly. But you can't get away from the data.
More importantly, some of the same things, like it's not exactly the same details, but some of the same circumstances, some of the same philosophies that we were criticizing previous government apply now, because look at the plan, right? One of the things that the previous opposition current government did was when the PNM said anything about a new tax or a decrease in a subsidy, oh, the PNM wicked. PNM wicked, how you could do so. And then when the PNM took out more loans and more foreign debts, right? How irresponsible that is. How you could keep on taking out loans, blah, 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 blah. Meanwhile, what is the government doing? The current government is getting more foreign debt, increasing taxes,
That's how
right?
they generated revenue.
And the thing is, right, they said when the previous administration were doing these things, and to be fair to the PNM, I think you could make the case that they weren't increasing taxes and fees and stuff to the same degree. But they were adding on taxes, and it was all viewed as the most wicked thing ever. But now all of a sudden, increasing taxes and adding fees and stuff is not wicked, right?
You know what it is? It is the extent to which it's being done, the focus on the private individual to pay those taxes, and it appears to the man in the street that the government hasn't got a plan or plan that is workable, at least in the short and medium term, to generate this new revenue by diversification of the economy. So they diversifying through tax and taxing you and then telling you that it's all for your good.
Well, here's the problem, because when you campaign on everybody wins, the implication is whatever the previous guy was doing, we're not going to do that. So when you come now and basically do that, and on some level, we're not saying that we shouldn't get loans and we shouldn't increase taxes, but it's how you do it and what's the reason. Because if you're taking out loans to finance your political promise of 10% and the, increased salaries, that's a far cry from taking out a loan for infrastructure, investment, capital projects, which will provide value and increase value for the economy moving forward, as well as help the country with liquidity, circulating in the economy. So when you say everybody wins, and you can't point us to how this is going to achieve that, you're not seeing the leadership, right? That was one of the criticisms we had with the PNM as well. But then on top of that now, you're also relying on the same thing that the previous government was relying on. 2027, we'll get better oil and gas revenue, which, as you pointed out, the Moody's and S&P are basically saying, we're not so sure how those things are going to fly, right? Because how volatile it is. Let's not forget, before COVID, there was a point in time when, the price of oil per barrel was $19, and one day I think it was in the negatives, it was trading in the negatives, something like that.
But that was a misrepresentation,
well,
but
right.
nevertheless, yes.
But and then there is also the whole 10-year revitalization program, of yes. which, again, this is coming from the Minister of Finance as to how they're going to pay back the loans. Increase oil and gas revenue, that it's not as though it's a guarantee, and a plan that apparently, there's been strong interest by investors. And why? Because when the credit ratings are saying, hey, the outlook is negative on your return of investment, right? But more importantly, it's not a plan. It's just concept art and a hope and a prayer and an intent, right? Yeah. It's technically, I don't know to what extent it's more or less realized than Vision 2020.
I think it's obfuscation. I think it's a lot of obfuscation. I think that people have been misled. I think people believe that whatever the government was doing was for the benefit of the people, until one day everybody woke up. You look at the special zones, and that has been such a disaster. Such a disaster. I, for one, was saying, okay, results do matter. Yes, results do matter, but at what price? And in fact, as I already said, Standard & Poor's, when they were looking at rating us and saying what was the positive, they were looking at the constitutional and democratic principles and the political stability that this country is known for. But is that being put at risk?
One of the things that I want to know is, to what extent, first of all, the media industry has been under stress for a long time, but we've just seen the Newsday basically shut its doors, right? The final issue for all intents and purposes, I believe, was distributed. They did publish something online a few days ago, but that wasn't like a full issue, right? Is that a sign, beyond just the industry struggles, and a sign of the economy? And to what extent are other small business owners and the like? Because bars usually don't make a lot of money during Carnival, but bars don't necessarily shut down en masse during Carnival. So while it's not necessarily clear what is the reason that contributes the most, at this point in time, there's a lot of, right, I mean, that's what they said. That's what the bar owner said. There are a lot of small anecdotal indicators. The problem is it seems like there's a lot of them. And it's widespread. And I don't know if maybe one of the reasons why the government doesn't want to tie everything all together in one plan is, since if they don't do that, then it's harder for you to perceive everything being connected with regards to what businesses close down, and who gets out of a job.
But I think the media pretty well made it known to the country that every day, whether it is the standards, whether it is the bars, whether it is the restaurants, whether it's the increase in natural gas prices, I think they've made it pretty clear to the national community that things are not what the government had anticipated would be. And this country, and then even with tourism, you know, just as an aside, which I did go to the panorama. This is my personal opinion. I'm sure if someone can change my mind on it, but the panorama on Sunday is a celebration not only of our culture, our cultural identity, which is unique to Trinidad and Tobago, but it's also a celebration of the people who are the people at the ground level, the people who are the persons who contribute to the most to our cultural identity. And to think that you could not, the price to go in to the panorama on Sunday, I couldn't believe it was $500. And if you came and said, oh, it was just $400, you couldn't subsidize that because you're making money off it, you know. You are making money off of the pan. Carnival, the people who come for Carnival, who spend the US dollars, who spend the Euro dollars, who spend the pound sterling, who stay in the hotels. The big, in terms of the airline industry, the hotel industry, the carnival bands, you name it, they make a significant contribution to Trinidad and Tobago. So it's not just our cultural identity, it comes down to foreign exchange reserves, which we are badly needing. And to think that our celebration really is the epitome of a poor man's struggle, people who are at the bottom of the economic ladder, that you could not find it, that you could not subsidize that. Why couldn't you subsidize it? Why couldn't you? Because to me, that is an indicator. Maybe from my point of view, I was shocked. I was really shocked. Because if you want to go out there as a family, a husband, a wife, with children, you spend $1,000 just getting in, just something that you labor in every single day, up, you know, something that people identify as the struggle of a poor man. And then you're going to put it in a position where he cannot afford to go. So what do? Well, you know what? Panorama didn't hardly anybody come up for Panorama. You know why? $400, $500. Why you couldn't subsidize that? So that to me is an indicator of the insensitivity of this government, whether it is the Joshua Samaru killing, which I make no comment on, except it looks really bad on their part. It shows the comments of the Prime Minister going after the independent senators, then going after the president, calling us some, I can't even remember the phrase.
Low-level PNM functionary.
Oh my God, she's the president of the country, of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, going after independent senators and say you weren't elected, but she didn't, the independent senators didn't set that up. There's the electoral college. That is how it has operated. It's not as though they decided. They're not members of parliament. They're not elected. They're appointed by the government. And you very well know that. You're doing as though they never face an electorate. They don't have to. They bring a special value to the parliament. These people are supposed to be, who are known to be persons who are known in their subject matter experts, and they bring that value to the parliament. That is their contribution to our parliament. And they turn around and say you were never elected. No, they're not going up for election.
I just like to point out, if you harp on that too much, then any government senator will more or less face the same thing, you know, and some of them lost the election, you know, traditionally. So I don't know if you want to keep pointing out the fact that the independent senators are appointed, because you have government senators, some of whom are ministers. Why?
But it's not, you see, to me, and I may be the politician in me, and so that will probably come to play in what I am saying. I look at what is going on now in Trinidad and Tobago as a government under significant pressure. A government that has not been able to deliver on the economic front. A government that's under tremendous pressure in justifying its position and realizing the revenue that it intended to do through energy. A government that is looking for distraction, looking for deflection, looking for anything to take a person's eye off of what appears to me to be a failing. And this is my approach. I might be wrong, but why would you have your Minister of National Security saying the nonsense he is talking about and not talking about body? Why won't you want the body cameras? To talk about the 3,000 and the cost, and why won't you want the body cameras? Why would you tell the national community that is not a priority, that we can't get the 3,000, but there's certain communities where those cameras should be used? Why don't you put that as a priority? Why are you telling me about counseling? Why are you telling me that there was an exchange of fire? And why are you saying that? And why are you having a prime minister going after your independent senators and saying without a shred of evidence to say two of them are willing to eat a food? Why are you doing that? The only reason I can see politically, which I think is a bad move, and it is not going to work. It is not going to work. You're causing too much divisiveness in this country. You're causing too much anger and resentment in this country. And if it is intended to distract us from the fact that we have, Standard & Poor's has given us a bad rating and continues to do so, and that they're blaming the government in part for why we are where we are, and the government taxing you left, right, and center and telling you you're doing it for your good. How long are you going to carry on that story? How long are we going to believe that you do? How about we don't believe you? How about we believe that you're doing it because you don't have the revenue? And so I end to say this from a political perspective. I do believe that the government, and I may be wrong, is using all these things, whether it is the zone of special operations, the statements coming from the Prime Minister herself, the statements coming from the Minister, Commissioner of Police, what you're seeing coming out from Standard & Poor's and so on. I do believe that the government is under significant pressure. I don't know if they have a plan, because even when you look at the reasons, with general causes, they blame part of the blame for the, they talk inefficient public sector mismanagement. That's you all.
Right, I want to get to that before I respond and throw something at you with regards to what you just last said. But with regards to inefficient public sector management, we're not blaming the government for the circumstances they find themselves in, right? We will all agree it was inherited. I have said multiple times, we're not blaming the PNM for certain aspects of the cost of living and the price of gas and stuff like that. What we're doing is criticizing their management within the constraints of the circumstances the country finds itself in. And it's no different now. Is that not fair? Because this is one example. The PNM had an idea. The Minister of Finance, the current Minister of Finance said, one of the things that they're looking at is the IMF identified a $10 billion tax gap, and they want to improve the revenue position by improving compliance, not by raising taxes. Now, they still raise some taxes. But let's go to that point where this is one of their goals, a goal that the previous administration had. The previous administration, whether you agreed that it was going to be effective or not, had a plan in the Revenue Authority. Something which technically they didn't come up on their own. Mr. Manning's time and when you were there, this was something that existed before. But regardless, whether, to whatever degree, this was now their plan, right?
Compliance.
So by improving the body that collects taxes, they will improve compliance. What did the UNC say? Oh, wicked, blah, 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 blah. We'll scrap that. Fine. Let's assume that what was being implemented was going to be bad. The Prime Minister herself said too much power in the Minister of Finance, whatever. All of that, let's just assume that that's fine. What's the replacement? Because they just said, we'll just improve BIR and customs. I'm pretty certain at some point somebody tried to improve the inefficient public sector in a similar manner, time immemorial. And it is more or less, we've never seen that work, right? I hate to say this because, blowing up the situation it should be a last resort. But I can't fault the PNM for reaching to that point because their predecessors in the PNM, all who were a different group of people, had a different leadership, had a similar conclusion. So it's fine if you disagree with the measure, but essentially the government said, we will improve things in a kind of a hand wave it away sort of manner without any sort of planned or detailed plan or explanation as to how exactly are you going to improve things. So at the end of the day, I am left to assume that the improved compliance for tax collection, I see nothing. We know nothing. So I can't believe it to exist unless it happens. I can't assume. And now one of the things that I want to get to is, because we're saying some of the same things that we said about the previous administration. And to be fair, the circumstances, the external pressure is the same. So it's actually in a way understandable that there's similar decisions. The management of how they implemented, how they communicated, that's where both situations is failing. But I do believe the previous administration mistakenly thought that they had the public support, so they were voted out, right? The current administration, I think there is still a large amount of the public that are wanting to believe in the government and give them the benefit of the doubt. And it's like we can't give up hope.
That is true.
Because I guess in their minds, this is the last bastion of hope. And in my opinion, while I could understand the psychology behind it, I fear that is a mistake, because if at any point in time when you're just, well, you know, let's just keep going and hope for the best. You know,
why is there that need for hope? Because there's a sense of hopelessness in the country, to be very honest. And I just want to go to your Revenue Authority, and you talk about public mismanagement. One of the recommendations that had been made early on with Standard & Poor's or Moody's, one of them, had said they did show a disappointment, and for you to put it in writing, has to be a great disappointment in implementing or establishing the Revenue Authority, because you want the institutional framework. What this government did in response was increase fourfold the fining, whatever you could be fined. So they made it almost punitive, so that if you did not comply, they gave themselves more investigative powers. They gave the revenue officers more investigative powers, but they did not change the institutional framework. And why do you want to change that? Because the management of the revenue position in Trinidad had a lot to do with the institutional framework. Because governments, not only Trinidad, all over, it is deep in bureaucracy. It is very difficult to remove a person. It's very difficult not to promote them because they've had the length of service. And what was the effort, what was the attempt that was being done? And there are revenue authorities all over the world. Barbados has countries have different versions of it, but the whole intention is to remove that regulatory power, that power of ensuring compliance by creating an institutional framework where the persons who are promoted are persons who have done so by virtue of meritocracy, not seniority. When you want to be able to take certain people out of positions, to be very frank with you, which you feel are not in the interest of the country, because you're putting up performance management systems and so on. And so if this country and if this government was serious, instead of increasing the taxes, increasing the investigative powers of the revenue officers, what they should have done was bring into effect a revenue authority with institutional framework will ensure compliance, but they did not do so. And when they went to court, as I've said previously, with Teresa Dorey versus the Attorney General, I don't think it's the Attorney General, but in any event, the argument was that Teresa Dorey, representing the Revenue Authority, saying that to remove or not to have a Revenue Authority is to remove the protection and the independence that the public servants enjoy from the government, because the government, by virtue of their position in terms of hiring and firing and so on, they will be able to exercise that sort of control, a sort of interference in the way that these institutions are run. And Teresa Dorey's decision said the Police Service Commission does the same job as was intended that the Revenue Authority would do, so that the Revenue Authority would provide the public servants with the needed insulation from political interference. So I couldn't understand why the government would not have implemented the Revenue Authority rather than increasing the fines, rather than increasing the investigative powers, if you do not have a structure that will facilitate proper compliance. And probably that is one of the reasons which you have already highlighted, the mismanagement of the government, because that's a revenue generator. The people who, I've said it before, who are they going after? They're not going after the small man. He's working for $90,000 per annum. You don't pay taxes, so you don't have to put in a tax return. It's the persons who are the commercial, the persons who are the major investors in the country who probably do not, you can avoid taxes, you cannot evade taxes. Those are the persons who the government should have been interested in targeting. And according to the data that we had, and I think it has been confirmed, over $5 billion hemorrhaging from our system at least $5 billion because of non-compliance with our revenue laws. So if it is that the government was serious about revenue generation, one of the things they should have done, but you see the public servants did want that.
No.
The PSC did want that.
That's one of the things. I wasn't necessarily as strongly negative over it at the time, and now with the benefit of hindsight, so you could say, well, it's not necessarily fair, right, in some respects. But I wasn't necessarily like 100% approving of it either. But now in hindsight, I do wonder if we have to look at that whole situation with the PSC and WASA and the 10% and say, well, at what point was that fiscally irresponsible? Because I can't see how you have all these indicators that the government does not have enough money for everything, down to Carnival. South Carnival competitions are cancelled, right? Now, the mayor of San Fernando said, well, look, the allocation on the PNM wasn't sufficient, but it's even less now. So it's not about politics. I've been saying it's insufficient all the time, but it's even less than what it was before, so we just can't continue, right? So he claims he's not trying to be political. I actually agree with him. I think even PNM local government bodies under PNM government were not hunky-dory, right? They just didn't speak out about it as much. But at the end of the day, what we find ourselves in is we have all these indicators, right? Could we, affording that 10%, that $3.8 billion back pay lump sum, now I'm not entirely sure, I don't think we got confirmation that they actually paid it all out, or if maybe that TSTT/Amplia deal was part of the non-cash, etc., right? But still,
money was paid.
Right? But still, money was paid, and were we in a position where we could have afforded it? Because that's like half of I believe the bond was $1 billion US.
$1 billion US.
Right. That's like, it's not like, not necessarily half, but it's a big chunk of that probably went just to pay off that.
You had HSF, when they talk about external reserves, they're talking about the HSF. And HSF has US 3.5 billion. So if you're a bondholder,
3.5 billion
US.
When did it drop from 5?
Well, I saw it 3.5 billion. Well, because how is money put into HSF is based on the price of oil and gas.
Yes.
And what they're saying is the price of oil and gas has reduced significantly. So the deposit into HSF is going to reduce itself. But borrowing on the bond, the reason why, when people say it was a great success, the reason why it could be success is because they had the money in the HSF in the event that the bond failed, in the event the government was unable to pay back.
I do believe that the previous administration, we had $1 billion bond.
Yeah, but you know
a couple of years ago.
You know what the government did? You know what the government did? I mean, I had spoken about that. I don't have the figures on me now. But what the government did, they changed the law and made an amendment to the act to broaden the ability of the government to withdraw from the fund.
No, but my point is, there was a previous $1 billion bond, I think it was 10 years as well, that the PNM did in order to try to offset the doubling of the deficit between the budget reading and the mid-year budget review. So we're seeing the same tactic. The problem is, as we mentioned before, because the HSF was supposed to be import cover as well as the financial mechanism that you guarantee the loans with. But there wasn't enough money to do both. So now, not only is it supposed to be import cover for our balance of trade, right, in case we have foreign exchange difficulties, but we have a previous loan under Coleman Bird. Now we have, bond issue under Coleman Bird. Now we have this one under Dave Tanku. That's 3 things, and I don't even know if the HSF could cover those things now, because $3.5 billion can't cover $2 billion in bonds.
Yeah, but the Standard & Poor's did say that is one of the reasons why the external buffers are there, and they identify the external buffers to protect the bond issuance by virtue of the fact that the HSF has over $3.5 billion in deposits.
One of the issues that I have is, without explanation, so if this is not true, it's not our fault that we don't know. When they decided to just outright scrap the WASA report, right? And also the TTRA. Those are indicators. Again, it might not actually prove to be this, but those are indicators that they're not looking to proactively try to improve government efficiency. If one of your issues is you have a high wage bill, you're not getting enough revenue to meet all your commitments and all your debts, where's one of the areas that you could save costs? Because no one is thinking the public sector is lean and mean the assumption, I understand politically, but at what, and yes, technically speaking, they won the election. They won the election by doing the politically popular thing. But at what point is the population going to understand? You know, sometimes what might seem popular is not necessarily what we need. It might be what we want, but because the consequences of being potentially, because again, they didn't explain it properly. So I'm for lack of information, I'm going with these assumptions for lack of information. Potentially, while it might seem, oh, well, they were good to the people of the PSA and stuff like that. Right, who pays for it? Because when you have a situation where you don't have enough money, there is no such thing as a free lunch. Who's paying for this? And it's gonna come essentially nickel and dime out to the population. That's what it seems like, because there's a lacking in explanations and leaderships on what is the plan, the vision.
I just looked it up. IMBERT dipped into HFF 8 times in 2021, right? And that was in the Trinidad Express in May 2022. And it totaled up over 600 million was withdrawn by IMBERT. So,
but I think the issue was, because he kept saying, look, it's at 5 billion, it's at 5 billion, but it's like, yes, but the HSF was at 5 billion for years.
5.7
You basically took out all the growth and more or less did not replace any of the money you took out with new revenue. I'm not too sure, I can't remember, but when that 1 year, when the price of oil went up dramatically and gas went up dramatically, there was also some issue with regards to the amount of money that was supposed to be put in the HSF. I can't remember if it's a timing thing, if they were late, almost like if they didn't want to put it in the HSF. But the thing was, throughout the PNM's tenure, my impression was, well, they kind of just utilized all of the growth. So we had 5 billion, but you know, when you adjust for inflation, it's not the same value that it was back in like 2016. But they kept saying, look, it hasn't shrunk. Yes, but cost of living, buying purchasing power of the dollar has decreased and it hasn't shrunk. That's not necessarily meaning that it's remained in a neutral position. And now they're just saying that it's at 3.5.
Well, at least that's what I read, eh?
Right.
And based on what I saw, it was actually 894 US, 6 billion from Trinidad and Tobago's
to try to hold us over, right?
And there is a plan. I mean, that's what the legislation does. What it says is that what the budget, that's why they tend to give a high price on the budget. Part of the reason. Part of the reason they don't want to deposit anything into the HSF, because a condition of depositing into the HSF where the differential between the budget price and the actual price of oil and gas is more than 10%, that amount, you have to deposit a certain percentage of that into the fund. So if you put a high price on oil and gas, it means that you would not have that 10% differential, which means you don't have to deposit into the HSF.
Isn't it funny how you're pointing out to the same accounting tricks both times? Because you said it with regards to IMBERT and you said it at the time, I believe, when we were analyzing the budget with regards to Minister Tanku. So that's it.
That's the politics. That's politics. So coming back to, because what they did, they amended the HSF, right? And what it did, it allows them to withdraw not exceeding US 1.5 billion anytime during the financial year. And the 3 conditions have to be met. A disaster area, so I guess COVID-19 will be one of them.
Right, yeah.
A dangerous infectious disease, which is the public health ordinance, and a precipitous decline in budgeted revenues, which are based on the production or price of crude oil or natural gas. Precipitous decline. So it doesn't say 10%. So the point I'm making is that the HSF, there was a plan for deposit into the HSF and the withdrawal from the HSF. What you have now is that the governments are still relying on the HSF as the external buffer to support the borrowing of bonds, which is what Colin Imbert said. He said the bonds were oversubscribed by 2.5 times. That's what I think Tanku said. Minister Tanku said that they've been a great success because there's been an oversubscription. Well, you would oversubscribe if you know that you would pay back your money, because there's something called the HSF, which has more than what you are what the government is borrowing from you. So I guess what I started, right, much more than what the...
Right, it's 3.5 billion US.
Yes, it's
right,
1 billion US that they're borrowing.
Right, yes.
But the HSF has 3.5 billion US right now.
Right.
So in the event that the government is unable to pay back at the end of the period of the bond issuance, they know that they have backing them up is the HSF. So it's no indication of the strength of the economy. So from what I can, yes, no indication. So in fact, what the Standard & Poor's did say, which should be troubling to Trinidad and Tobago, is that on every level, except for the external buffers, which is the HSF, Trinidad and Tobago's situation is worrying, is troubling, is concerning, and I don't think that this government has been able to deliver, and then much of what it has done is to involve themselves in so much, name calling of the most, it is so unattractive to come from your prime minister, going after your senators, going after your commissioner of police, as I said, in national security. I mean, you name it. In crime, they have done such a disservice to the country, and in terms of the economy, if we have to look at what Standard & Poor's and Moody's said at the end of last year, and now we have Standard & Poor's now saying that our liquidity position is declining, meaning the available cash. There isn't that available cash. And the same reasons that they had given us a negative outlook seem to be persisting. The revenue generation is not there, and whatever the government may want to tell the people of Trinidad and Tobago, it appears to me that their quick and easy, not easy, but the quick method of raising or generating revenue is taxing the people of Trinidad and Tobago.
But as I've said before, my fear is that this, on a certain level, is not going to provide the same net increase that you would think.
No.
Because whenever you do things like this, it incentivizes people to change their habits. And, in California, they leave California. In Trinidad, lack of local reinvestment of profits into Trinidad. But for the small man, it comes down to, well, I have less money to spend. Right?
Well,
you're already not getting income tax from me. But also, we said this with regards to the CPEP, ERP, forestry workers being sent home. Some part of the money circulation in the economy are the low-income people who are spending just to survive, and they're spending on, basic goods, physical goods, not a whole set of financial instruments and being no, it's and those basic goods, some of which either were canned here, manufactured here, or very much distributed here, right? So there are multiple businesses involved, from the warehouses, right? Yeah, just basic alcohol, like the warehouse distribution, the truck drivers, the bottlers, etc., etc.
Maxi taxi drivers,
right? The maxi taxi, right? All of these things, the money circulates, and now when you take that out and you slow down the economy, things like VAT, and then now when businesses close down, your income tax, your corporate tax, income tax of workers who no longer have jobs turns to zero by default.
I think we.
Okay, we have Clarkson on the line. Caller, good morning. You on here?
Yeah, hi.
Morning. Mute your TV.
Yeah. Hello. Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning, John and Mr. Kera. Yeah. What we need in this country is truth. You see, people start dealing with truth and telling the people the truth, especially media personnel like Sean, Mr. Shearer, and many more. Because the people and them in this country seems like they, with all the education they get, something lacking in their mind that they do. They can't see truth from lie. And that is because the media itself confuses the people. If people had listened carefully with all the arrogance they say with Dr. Keith Rowley and all the mischief they want to believe, I keep saying the same demonization they did with Patrick Manning is the same thing they do with Dr. Keith Rowley. And today, if they didn't listen carefully, Dr. Keith Rowley had said from 2021 going onward, we'll have a difficult time and we will implement our own IMF. That is meaning that certain things that we wouldn't be able to do at this time, but we will manage the country. But people don't want to listen to that. You understand? They come back and the same 2010 come back and repeat itself today. You understand? With these same people who cannot manage the country and putting us into all these difficulties. It's going to get worse than this, Sean and Mr. Shera. It's going to get worse because they cannot manage the country. And the kind of things that they are saying, if you listen to Alexander, the two Alexander, they are saying some kind of out-of-timing thing, talking about the business people, all kind of stupidness they're saying. They may really come to manage no country. If this woman will leave the TTRA, all that she will not have to be going through all this taxing people today and putting people under this kind of unease measures. You understand? Certain things what she could have done, but she could have helped the TTRA by making it better. And everybody, the whole country that be contributing, and she would have pulled resources from there. The money what she taking is to pay debts. How that going to help us in the future? How that is helping us? You understand? But the final thing comes down to this. As media personnel, we need to start telling the people the truth. Helping the people to understand what is really going on if we want this country to go forward. You understand? Truth is necessary in this country. Too much of lie, propaganda, and misinformation. Thank you.
I just want to say what he said. You could say that about the Patrick. I'm sorry, not that Patrick Manning. You could say that about Dr. Rowley, and that had a lot to do with the fact that his manner was very abrasive and very accusatory, but it also was not. It did not seem to show any empathy for what people were going through. So you may say he had better plans for managing the country. I don't know if he did or not, but what I could say is he did not have the trust and confidence that he should have had with the people, and that reflected in the voting. And the fact that many people could not bring themselves, based on what I saw and based on the data, could not bring themselves to vote for the current government, but they simply could not bring themselves to vote for the former government. And a lot of it had to do with what they perceived to be the arrogance, the sense of out of touch. I mean, people may forget that, but before we had elections, that was a constant refrain. The fact that people felt that the Prime Minister's famous words, nothing wrong with the rich getting richer. He said that. Known for that. There were so many things that his government did in the way that they managed the man on the street who felt, whether rightly or wrongly, that the former government was not there for them. The government was there to, rightly or wrongly, that they were being used for votes, when they had their meetings to trot them out, which is what this other government does. But what they felt, there's so much disenchantment, so much disillusionment that you seem to forget. So even if they had better plans and better management, is a lesson to you and a lesson to all of us that that intangible thing called trust and confidence, it does play a large part. It does get people to go along. It does get people to do what you have just said, which I do agree with you, that it needs to be more truth, level with the people. Don't tell them what they want to hear. But if you have a good relationship, like as you have a professional or personal relationship, tell the truth. People are willing to go along with you most in any event if they believe that you're leveling with them and that there is light at the end of the tunnel. So I think both administrations have that as one of their major obstacles. Mm-hmm. They do. Dr. Rowley and his Stuart Young, whoever wants to support that. But how was Stuart Young becoming the Prime Minister? How was he becoming the Prime Minister? You held on to political leadership. You know that was not popular. If you had any question, and I have nothing against Stuart Young, I'm just saying, looking at it from the outside, if you had any question that Stuart Young was not the choice of the members of Parliament, the manner in which they have dealt with him, the manner in which they've had Penny Beckers become their opposition leader, the manner in which he seemed distant from them, there's no question in my mind that how the political leader, Dr. Rowley, managed country. There was a sense of autocracy. He was very autocratic. He was very dictatorial. He came across as insensitive, and his great success, by the way, which is what I think, in my respectful opinion, caused the government to come in for a second term, was COVID, because you needed a strong leader. You needed a no-nonsense leader, and people believed that he had the qualities that were necessary to literally save your life. Save your life. But after COVID was over, and the country sort of went back to its norm, those are the same things about, I didn't tell you who to put in your bed. All those kind of things. You know, he's so antagonized. so antagonized, and he seemed to be there supporting a particular group of people who did not have the interests of this country at hand. Look at what happened to national security. Look what happened to the scanners. Look what happened with the OPVs. Look what happened to TTRA. Every single indicator. I mean, yes, this government seems to be going on the same road, but they both went on, and that is why Trump, I'm sorry, Sean. You're not Trump. That's why Sean, yeah, because what Sean is really saying, I believe, this is my opinion, there is a sense of hopelessness in the country because they're unhappy with people have short memories, you know, but you put them back there now. The reason they are not there, because they even said, what is it? That famous saying by the Louis XIV of France with his wife, Antoinette. Let them eat cake. People felt that about the government. Let them eat cake. They were incensed. They were in a little ivory tower, insensitive to the needs of the people. So even if the former prime minister had a better management, even if his plan was a better one, the reality is that he squandered the trust and confidence. And this government is going, seems to me, looking at it, unless there's a course correction, it seems to me that this government is going on the same road. The only difference is this: when people look at what are their choices, which is why, finally shown, which is why when they had the national elections, how many people stayed home? How many? What does that say to you? They could not vote for the current administration, but guess what? They couldn't vote for the one before. So I don't know what the answer to it. So Mr. Kaxembe, I do agree with you, level with the people. Stop telling us to do the taxes because you want the roads to be better, you want to save our lives. You're not doing that, man. You're doing it because you need to generate revenue. Stop telling us all of this thing about the independent senators when in fact, you know, so yeah, they say they have a call line.
No, I'll just say this: history is repeating itself, but it repeated itself both for the PNM and the UNC. And one thing, though, that is unique to this government, I could be wrong, but I don't remember ever hearing the line minister admitting he knows nothing of an official major policy change that impacts the public. I've never heard that under the PNM. I've heard a lot of things under the PNM, but I don't recall hearing that in the PNM. We have another call on the line. Caller, good morning. You're on here.
Morning, Sean, and morning, Karen.
Morning.
Now, I want to say something, right? Everybody jumping on the bandwagon and talking about this government. People have to know that they have to give this government a chance. The government came in, when they came in, this country was in a mess under the former administration. You understand? And everybody lambasting the government. Give the government a chance. It's a new government coming to fix and do what they have to do. They now start, all you don't expect to get everything one time. Thing takes time. So give her a chance. Give the government a chance. You understand? PNM had the country, the whole mess. 10 years. Nobody seems to talking about it. But is this government? Everybody had to say something. Eh? That is wrong. Give them a chance.
They're doing it to themselves.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, caller. Well, first of all, we didn't wait until 10 years to talk about what the PNM was doing wrong.
Exactly.
So again, we're consistent, right? It's not our fault that this government seemingly is picking up where the PNM left off, right? Because you're saying give them a chance. It's two things. One, how long? Right? More importantly, I understand that you can't accomplish things. You can't build room in a day, but you start building room on the first day. And what we're seeing are not indicators of starting to build room. What we're seeing is more of the same. Indicators of more of the same. Not having a plan. Or if you have a plan, not being able to communicate the plan. And then also, what have we seen? Politically motivated decisions that are questionable with regards to the fiscal responsibility. What else am I going to say? Also, it's been almost a year, right? And again, I don't expect all the problems to be solved. In fact, I don't even think in 5 years they can solve all the problems. It's just that we have yet to see any indicators that they are solving or beginning to solve any of the problems.
And I just want to add very quickly, a lot of what you're seeing is self-inflicted wounds. People wanted to support this government. People voted for this government because they believe this government was going to be different. That is what they have been. That is the disappointment you're seeing. So give this government a chance. When you go in and talk about the senators the way you have spoken about the senators, when you have Commissioner of Police saying exchange of fire, and then when you see the video, and then when it comes out, he's not resigning. What do you mean give this government a chance? When you have when you have the Minister of National Security saying, what are you talking about body cameras? We need to protect the police officers. Give this government a chance. This government has done a lot of damage to itself in the same way that the previous government did damages that may be in a different way, but amongst the same thing. They have caused a person to be disillusioned, disenchanted, and you know what's the difference? When they came in, people hoped that there was going to be that difference. And what they have seen from whether it's the Venezuela-Trump issue, whatever it is, what you have seen is a level of aggression, a level of insensitivity from this government. So do not tell people to give this government a chance. This government has done this to itself.
I just want to point out, it's literally the same level of passion Karen criticized PNM.
Very much so. They got angry with that.
Literally the same level of passion. PNM supporters wanted to say the same things that UNC supporters probably want to say to Karen now. And myself. We have another call on the line. Caller, good morning. You're on the air.
Morning, Sean.
Morning.
Morning, Mr. Shera. Morning. Let us go back. I'll make this country ungovernable, 2015, swearing in. The mess we met in 2015 ain't clean yet. Let me tell the settlers of my Amerindian land that this morning. And we are going down a fiery and bloody lane. We have to come to our senses quick. Quick is the word.
Sure, I think so too.
Do not class Mr. Rowley government with this lady. She put us in a mess with our brothers and sisters up the Caribbean chain, and she do it triple time, this time again. All the killing that take place, the murder that take place out there, regardless of if they were guilty or not from Colombia, with the drugs and the bombs and everything out there, with that scanner business outside in Tobago, the lying. I saw that in Ukraine, the same thing, the same scanner. So who Alexander trying to fool anyway? Homeland Security was brought there to get her gang members at work.
Of course no.
The big government we have, she had us to let go the poor people, close down all the youth programs to get money to pay her gang. That Red House is where the most dangerous gang is. How much people on bail in this government? Nobody's speaking about that. And we getting fed up, Sean. The indigenous people on the whole of the northern range and scattering out now like ants, getting fed up, Next thing, Mount Hope Hospital will be covered with mosquito at any time now. Miss Kadisha Amin, you say you start running, start to run because like you're moving like a snail. All that grass in front by the bus route there, get it cut quick, fast. Before the doctors and nurses and everybody in that hospital had to be removed. I was there yesterday doing an operation, a small thing in this tunnel business, and 2 mosquitoes inside it with me. What is going on with this government? The lady disrespecting the parliament again. And Sean, do a count to me on all those who in bail. When I call you back, you'll give me the figure. Because we're having a war council meeting soon in the Northern Range. Right? And will you pray hard. Be safe. Goodbye.
I want to say this, you know, I even forgot that. The CARICOM. Remember the whole of CARICOM, you went against CARICOM? I mean, in a very strong way. So, you know.
That's it.
You know,
I didn't necessarily, I'm not saying that she was wrong for disagreeing with CARICOM. It's just how.
No, but there was no, because what they showed is the major beneficiary of CARICOM is us. The $5.1 billion we get in trade is us. How you saying CARICOM means nothing when they had that whole issue with Guyana?
Exactly.
When they had that whole issue with Guyana and they had to determine whether they do over the election, they sent a whole team for the CARICOM region. How can you minimize the importance of CARICOM? People have fought so long for CARICOM, so you come out against CARICOM, you come out against the Law Association, you come out against the independent senators, you come out, you have your minister. You have done so much to squander the goodwill which many people in this country had towards you. I cannot understand it actually, because you had the ability. You're charismatic. You come across as caring. You have a good command of the English language, and you come across as being really a person who, when you hear what you say, you come across as being genuine. And to take all of that and to squander it, it's not that people are against you. They are against what they've seen happen to this country. Nobody's supporting. I am not supporting. By the way, I'm neutral. I am for Trinidad and Tobago. So if what they had before was not good for the country, I'm not saying what is here is good for the country. What I am saying, though, do not say that people give them time. Give them time, but there's no need for them to approach the issues as they are when they have so much goodwill. They had so much goodwill in this country. You firing these CPAP workers, you firing Europe, and then you talk about why you didn't use that argument in court when the matter went to court as the reason why you closed it down. Why didn't you give examples of the corruption? I'm not saying there isn't corruption, but I have a feeling it was corruption when your administration was there too, and they didn't close it down either, because it benefited you politically too. So the whole long and short of it is, the person who says give them time, I want to give them time. I want this country to succeed. But I am saying to you, the mistakes that the former government made, and unfortunately I've seen it repeated in this government. I don't know what is motivating them to come across as very aggressive, and they will not step down. They seem to be ratcheting it up.
Which is very similar to, again, what you just reiterated with regards to Dr. Keith Rowley. Combative, amongst other things. Listen, the whole thing with the independent senators bench, to me, was just unnecessary. Right? It is what it is. If you want, listen, on some level, we all know who appointed the president, and the president appointed the independent senators. But to attack them in that way gave you nothing. It achieved nothing. Arguably, it just only made your situation worse. That said, you know, after on some level, one could assume they might have known that the bills for ZOSOs would have never gone through regardless, or at least made that assumption. But even if you make that assumption, publicly attacking the independent bench before the vote accomplishes nothing. And in many ways, it kind of just puts a lot of the heat on you unnecessarily. So I agree with Karen. I don't understand that either.
You know what I didn't understand either? I mean, this is this whole game of, all due respect to the Prime Minister, but I feel there's a level of duplicity then. You're doing something, telling me you're taxing me, but it's my good, so I wouldn't have so many lives lost on the road, right? So you're saying all we're doing is for your good. But then I read in the papers, I don't think I was wrong, you read about these special zones of operation. You have to determine when a particular area in the country qualifies as a special zone of operation, which is like a state of emergency. What foreign direct investors going to come into a country like that? You know how much tension and resentment that you are creating, because these special zones of operations, you are looking at what level of crime. And what did you have to say? I mean, I am saying, this is what I think, I believe I read, that you are saying the poor young black men, you know, they are trying, and we're going to try and protect them. And we're having these special zones. You think we're attacking them? No, we're not attacking them. We're helping them. But guess what? You are creating an environment which the former Prime Minister, Dr. Rowley, was more, he was not as direct in what he said, but he used language to show that the divisiveness of this special operations is going to cause in Trinidad and Tobago has a lot to do with ethnic diversity, the ethnic issue. And I am saying that you, as the Prime Minister, coming out indirectly and talking about your helping. So what are you saying that for? You must know that people are going to read that as if you are saying they are right to say that the young black men are the criminals in this country. But we're not fighting, you know.
I actually don't
You didn't say that way?
No, I don't think that she must know, because I don't necessarily agree or understand it either. But history has shown a lot of people will want to talk about insensitive topics in an insensitive manner and can't appreciate the fact that it's insensitive and incendiary. Now, I get it. I am more than willing to talk about insensitive things, right? Because I think, listen, the need to want to protect us from our feelings at times is going way overboard, and we're producing generations of young people that do not have the ability to critically think on complex and difficult issues. Because you can't hide from difficult issues and just hope it goes away. That's not how it works. That's not how it works. But I do think that they have some people that they just, what's the big deal? What's the big deal? I'm just saying it like how it is, not understanding, yeah, one, that sometimes is an excuse for those that are trying to be insulting, and two, it's insensitive enough that it's going to be, whether intentional or not, insulting. And if you're a politician who doesn't understand that and can't understand that, that's not necessarily a good sign. But it's not necessarily unique to any one party or any one politician or any one public servant.
But she has been pushing it more. Look, I just picked up one of the headlines, which is
no. So my point is,
crime statistics are not racism.
I am not going to say that they know better, right? And I don't understand why, because this is another aspect of public relations and public communications where I see deficiencies in our political class. The only time politicians understand these things tend to be when it's in their benefit. So do you really appreciate it? Now, we're running out of time, so I want to close with two quick things. Well, I'll try and be quick. One of the issues about the give a chance is that, listen, how long could we afford, right, if things don't get better? Because part of the issues that we have are long-term deficiencies like the public sector's inefficiency. And if we don't even see any attempt to start the ball rolling to fix these things, I have to admit, I betrayed my own ideals, because before the election, one of the things that I thought, if I was making the decisions in a very broad, general way, it would be to deal with the excess in the public service and to try to use the money saved there, whatever that can actually be used, because, you know, it might have to just automatically go elsewhere anyway. With regards to trying to deal with the education system. Because, as I pointed out yesterday, both the Minister of Education and the Minister of Tertiary Education, in my mind, they're both pushing the panic button at the same time. Part of it is budget, which is something I've been talking about for years now, right? But the key point of what I just said is start with the inefficiencies in the public sector. The wage bill alone is like, well, just offer the PSA, because it's $450 million increase from the 10%, right? Isn't the wage, I think that's per year, but the wage, I believe it's per year, right? But the wage bill coming out of the mid-year budget review last year, I think it's something like $2 billion plus, right? Hey, maybe if we could save some money there, and who believes that, again, public institutions are lean and mean and have no room for cutting and has no extra fat, no redundant workers, no unproductive workers. All right. Not looking to deal with some of these long-term issues. You didn't cause it, I get that. But at some point, and I get it, your predecessor didn't have the courage to do it. You yourself before didn't have the courage to do it. Now, Mr. Manning, on some of these things, he was pushing hard for it. Maybe you could argue he didn't communicate it well and it looked very autocratic himself. But then when you look at the plans, you could at least see some attempts to be made. So that's why it's unpopular. These things are not popular. And it seems as though our political class, they're more than happy to kick the can down the road every time. So if I want to feel as though there's hope in a situation, one of the things is I want to see someone address these things. The current THA administration, at one point they did say they were going to look at the excess hiring. Now, to what degree did they actually do anything about it? I don't know. But listen, at least identifying the problem is the first step, and they did more than any other political party within the last 15 years on the matter. And I say that to then now close with this. I understand that people want to hold on hope, but what I don't understand is why is it for the majority of the population, you pick a side, and then the side you pick has to be right, and the other side has to be wrong. And you might change who you pick, right? You might go PNM one term and UNC the other term. But why is it that it has to be binary? One side has to be right, and the other side has to be wrong. So because it's obvious the PNM was wrong, because look at how they lost the election and everybody respects them, that means that automatically the UNC must be right, When they go to the toilet, it doesn't smell. Whatever decisions they make has to be the most genius decisions. And if we just give them a time, they will automatically solve the problem. Not only should we not be critical of them, but how dare we be critical of them. But the fact of the matter is, one of the issues with the last administration was a weak opposition was not able to hold them in check. And one of the reasons that contributed to UNC's victory was because the PNM shot themselves in the foot with unforced errors to the point where it was getting ridiculous in the last couple of years, right? And now Karen points it out. It's unforced errors. Listen, no one is saying the PNM is ready to be the government if they call a snap election now. They need to prove themselves from where they were. But at the same time, just because you win the election doesn't mean now, well, we could do whatever we want. You know, they ain't riot yet. I mean...
I think part of the reason why that happened is because the way in which there was such a sense of ecstasy, a sense of hope in the country. I mean, you know, I think that went to the head of the UNC, that they felt they could push that envelope, and they pushed that envelope too far. And to regard to what you're saying about all of these public sector wage bill, hiring doesn't mean you don't redirect. All those areas in the economy where you need to have diversification, you can take those same persons and create opportunity to them. Because they're no longer working in the public service doesn't mean they have nothing, there's no future for them. When you lay down your plan, you say, yes, we're taking X out, but this is the plan that we have, and you then put it into place. And I think we're seeing from both of them, you know, it is just so sad, personally speaking. It's so sad to see what has happened, with both parties. And the key to it all, I believe, is the lack of not just trust that they have not been able to, either party has been able to get from the country, but there is also a sense of you feel that you're being, persons are not being respected. There's a sense that there's a lack of respect for the citizens of this country. As though once you put you in political power, you can do what you want, you can be autocratic, you can be all the things that you seem to be showing both sides without understanding the people are looking at you, and the people are looking at you, they are not foolish, and they resent you taking them for granted. They resent the lack of respect that you are showing to them. And you having that power within the political power, both sides of the equation have made the same mistakes. It's unfortunate that this current government, coming in with such goodwill and such promise, almost immediately shut down CPEP. What are you saying? What are you saying when you do that?
We have to close, but quick, history is repeating itself. First of all, before the election, you know, a certain person from NH International was complaining about Chinese contractors getting all the work. I wonder when did that happen before? More importantly, look, the partnership won by a significant margin, right? The voting difference was significant. It's near the same. The partnership lasted for one term. I wonder, to what extent do we want to allow history to repeat itself? Because history says, as Karen said, for the PNM, and now we can apply for the UNC. One of the indicators of future behavior is past behavior. Right? By the way, Karen did say with regards to the PNM, let them be kicked. It's what it seemed like under them.
That's what it was like.
History is repeating itself. She's saying that currently about the current administration. Right? We have some comments. Let's take the comments real fast. Under what conditions can a cop be removed from office? I believe unfortunately, it's the Police Service Commission, which I believe might have been appointed by the previous administration. I can't remember at this point because that whole institution is a mess in and of itself.
But I do think, just to say, based on what has come out in the public domain, there's the insufficient ground at least to put some questions to the current Commissioner of Police. Not so much of what he has said after the fact, but what he said before the fact, and where there's a clear lack of trust and confidence based on what you have seen with your own two eyes.
Oh, my thing is actually after the fact. Once the video comes out and you're doubling down. Oh, sorry, right. Yes, but to some extent, even the day of the shooting, when he, as you pointed out earlier, when he said, oh, there was an exchange of fire. Listen, the survivor is very adamant, apparently, that there was no gun. The implication is that they kind of prevented her from speaking to the public because they didn't want that statement out there. That is the implication of a family member, right? Of what a family member said, or what I read out of it. That's not proven. That said, it's the Police Service Commission that has to deal with it. Technically speaking, the government can't. The government can't, or at least they're not supposed to That's why the meritless fiasco was a fiasco. That said, I find it very curious that when Ayla was arrested and we don't even know what she was charged with, she was suspended. But we could have a horrible representation that undermines trust and confidence in the service. But hey, nothing to see here, you know, let's move on. So, I don't know, do we have another comment? Is that a senior minister reported that as the PM and head of the National Security Council, what did the PM do with the information rather than acting? No, well, it seems like she did nothing, right? Because I'm pretty sure if there was some sort of investigation we would have heard of it by now.
More importantly, the Minister of National Security, what he has said openly about needing more vests to protect the officers.
This is with regards to the independent senators.
Oh, with independent senators,
yes.
My God.
Yeah. Right? So I understand that. I mean, that is the million-dollar question. If they attempted to get a bribe, what did you do about it? This is also something that we have brought up with regards to the PNM. Because I said, you can't go and imply things that they imply. Listen, whether you like Gary Griffin or not, at the time, Dr. Heath Rowley implied a lot about Gary Griffin. We have yet to see anything come from that, right? We have yet to see anything come from that. So is it deflection and distraction? I hate to say this, but that's how it comes across.
There was something against Gary Griffith with the FUL, so I don't think it could be...
but I believe that it's officers in the unit that were charged, but I don't think he was charged.
And one has to wonder why.
Right, let's go with another... Oh, that's it? All right, so more or less it's over. Listen, we'll go back to what we said, and we technically did say this under the PNM. We don't want the government to fail.
We don't.
We both thought, hey, maybe this election result was a chance for a fresh start, to see change. Not necessarily liking the changes so far. And back to answer to the previous caller, you know, hopefully this isn't redundant. I don't think the country could afford to wait and hope and give them a chance. You have to understand, people's livelihoods are being affected day by day. And the risk now that the economy is going to go further into a hole because the right decisions weren't necessarily made for potentially more than the last 10 years, and now we're seeing a continuance of that. Because part of it is, even if you technically make the right decisions numbers-wise, if you communicate it fully to the public and there's no public buy-in and there's no public trust and confidence, then the public reaction to the economy, the engagement with the economy, the investment back into the economy is not going to be what you need it to be. So it's not just about the decisions they make, it's also what kind of leadership is being shown. To be fair, didn't necessarily see great leadership at times from the PNM, but I'll say this, and I said this before the election, at the very least, Dr. Heath Rowley semi-regularly, I won't say that he did enough, but he semi-regularly went into a press conference. Yes, at times he was abrasive, but he did take questions from the media, and more importantly, you saw him. Some of the callers are pointing out, the Prime Minister seems to be governing by Twitter pronouncements.
Yeah, that is true.
We don't even know if those are her actual words.
That is true.
So with that said, it's not as though all is lost and I'm done with the government. I do wish that the Home Minister of Homeland Security would be replaced, but that's a whole other story. Also the Commissioner. But
Police.
I'm not putting some of those things directly on the foot of the Prime Minister. I don't necessarily think that, she's doing such a big job, we need a snap election now. But we are saying these things because we want to see improvement with regards to implementation, policy decisions, and potentially, most importantly, communication. So thanks to the commenters, thanks to the callers, thanks Karen for joining me once again, folks. This is Talking About the WESN, reminding you have a good day, stay safe, remember your allegiance to the Republic and to each other. Do not, if you don't like the government, don't take it upon yourself to do something drastic and foolish now. And be nice, we'll see you tomorrow, bye-bye.
WESN.
Good morning and welcome back to Dollars and Cents. Now, on this show we talk about a lot of things as it relates to money and the psychology of money, particularly in this episode. Now, I try to consider myself sometimes as a counseling financial therapist or psychologist, right? But I have an actual financial or actual consultant psychologist